Everyone laughed when a 12-year-old girl collected old irrigation pipes until they saw her crops. The summer Sophie Winters turned 12, she started collecting things other people had given up on. Every Saturday morning, she'd walk the dusty back roads of Kern County, California, stopping at the edges of orange groves and pistachio orchards where broken equipment sat baking in the sun. She wasn't looking for scrap metal to sell. She wasn't building a tree fort. She had a single quiet purpose, and she wasn't telling anyone what it was. She knocked on barn doors. She asked politely, and farmer after farmer said the same thing. "Sure, kid, help yourself." Then they'd lean against their trucks and watch her wrestle coils of split drip line and broken PVC pipe into the bed of her father's old pickup. And they'd smile, not the cruel kind of smile, the confused kind. The kind that comes when you see something that doesn't make sense but doesn't hurt anyone either. A 12-year-old girl collecting garbage pipe. By late June, she had enough to circle her school playground 3 times, and she still hadn't explained herself to a single soul. Nobody knew what she was planning, not even her parents. If stories of quiet persistence and unexpected solutions move you, subscribe and join us every week. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to know how far this story has traveled. Kern County sits at the southern edge of California's Central Valley, where the flatland stretches toward the Tehachapi Mountains, and summer temperatures climb past 107 degrees by noon. The air smells like citrus blossoms and diesel fuel. It's the kind of place where families have worked the same soil for 3 generations and aren't ashamed to say so. Sophie Winters was the youngest of 2 daughters, born to David and Natalie Winters, who worked 15 acres, half citrus, half vegetables for the farmer's market. David grew oranges and lemons with the same quiet precision he applied to everything else in life. Natalie kept a garden of extraordinary ambition. Heirloom chilies from New Mexico, summer squash, bell peppers staked on cedar poles she cut herself. It was Natalie who first put seeds in Sophie's hands when Sophie was barely tall enough to reach the soil without kneeling. Sophie's neighbor, Mr. Angelo Baros, lived in a small house next door. He was 76 years old and spent most mornings on his porch with a cup of espresso and old farm journal magazines from the 1980s. He read them the way other people read mystery novels. It was Mr. Baros who first noticed that Sophie watched the fields differently than other children did. Not looking at the crops, looking at the water, where it pooled, where it ran off, where the soil cracked first in the dry heat, where it stayed dark the longest after irrigation. The summer Kern County entered its 4th year of severe drought. Sophie began to see a problem the adults around her had simply learned to live with. Her father's vegetable rows were suffering in the southwest corner of the property, where the soil was sandier and water moved through it too fast to do much good. The county agricultural advisor, a steady woman named Rebecca Sandoval, had come out twice to assess the situation and offered what advice she could. Irrigate more frequently, or reduce your planted area, or install a commercial micro-irrigation system. The quote for that system was $8,400. David Winters went quiet when he saw the number. Sophie was there when Rebecca visited the 2nd time. She asked a question Rebecca wasn't used to hearing from 12-year-olds. "Where does the water go that doesn't reach the roots?" Rebecca paused. "Evaporates off the soil surface, or runs to the property line and disappears." Sophie nodded slowly, the way a person nods when they've been thinking about something for a long time and just needed one more piece to confirm it. That was late May. By June, she was collecting pipe. Here's what Sophie understood, and what most of the adults around her had never quite put together. Water doesn't follow schedules, it follows physics. She'd been reading Mr. Baros's old magazines. She'd learned about subsurface drip irrigation, a method that delivers water 4 to 6 inches below the soil surface, directly to plant roots. It uses 70% less water than surface watering because none of it evaporates in the heat. And it makes roots grow deeper, which makes plants more drought-resistant. The method came from Israel. California farmers started using it for almonds and citrus back in the 1990s. But those systems cost thousands of dollars. Sophie had another idea. Mr. Baros had an old water tank sitting on cinder blocks behind his house, about 8 feet off the ground. He hadn't used it since 2015. Sophie knocked on his door. "On Saturday afternoon, Mr. Baros, can I borrow your tank?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "If you can make that thing useful again, it's yours." 8 feet of elevation, routed through the right pipe network, would generate 3.5 pounds per square inch of water pressure, just enough to run 200 feet of drip line. No electricity, no pump, just gravity. What she built that summer was not elegant. It was a child's version of an engineer's idea, assembled with salvaged drip tape, mismatched PVC connectors, and electrical tape. She filled the tank with a garden hose. It took 6 hours. She mapped the vegetable rows on graph paper. Her father watched from a distance the first weekend, said nothing, and then quietly grabbed a shovel and helped her dig shallow trenches. That was David's way. Her older sister Olivia thought the whole thing was weird and filmed it on her phone. She posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Baby Sister's Weird Science Project." The first attempt failed. Sophie opened the valve and water sprayed from 7 different connection points. It didn't reach the plants. The tank was empty in 40 minutes. She refitted every joint with proper PVC cement and tried again. The second attempt was better. Water reached the plants, but the flow was uneven. Some emitters gushed, others barely dripped. Half the rows got soaked, half got nothing. She went back to Mr. Baros's magazines. She found an article from 1987, Pressure Compensation in Low-Head Drip Systems. She realized she needed pressure compensating emitters, devices that deliver water evenly no matter where they sit in the line. The problem was those cost money. Stay with us. What happens next changed everything. For 3 Saturdays, Sophie went to the Kern County swap meet. On the 3rd week, she found a retired grower named Tommy Nguyen selling boxes of old irrigation parts from a folding table. She explained her project. Tommy listened. Then he handed her a box of pressure-compensating emitters. "My niece is about your age," he said. "She should meet kids like you." He charged her $12 for $300 worth of parts. On her 3rd attempt, the system worked. By mid-July, the vegetable rows in the southwest corner were thriving. David noticed first. He walked the rows early one morning before the heat arrived. The soil surface was dry and cracked, which was good. It meant no water was evaporating. But when he dug down 4 inches, the earth was dark and moist. The pepper plants were 2 feet taller than the ones in the main garden. The squash leaves were broad and unwilted, even in 108-degree heat. He found Sophie lying flat in the dirt, adjusting an emitter, a notebook open beside her. "How much water is this using?" he asked. She showed him the math. Old system, 180 gallons per watering. Her system, 65 gallons, a 64% reduction. David stared at the number for a long time. Then he asked, "Can we expand this to the citrus rows?" Rebecca Sandoval came back in August, this time unannounced. "I've never seen a gravity-fed subsurface setup built from salvage work like this," she said quietly. By September, word had traveled. The farmers who had handed Sophie their broken pipe, the ones who'd smiled from their trucks, drove out to see for themselves. They came expecting to be polite. They weren't prepared for what they found. The southwest corner looked like it belonged to a different climate. While neighboring vegetable patches stood stunted and pale, Sophie's rows were lush and dark green. The bell peppers were so heavy they needed extra stakes. The squash leaves were broad as dinner plates. The chili vines climbed 8 feet up their trellises. Vandana Shiva once wrote, "In nature's economy, the currency is not money, it is life." Sophie Winters grew peppers and squash that summer, exceptional water-efficient vegetables that outperformed fields managed by people with decades of experience. But that wasn't the real harvest. The real harvest was harder to measure. The courage of a 12-year-old who saw waste as resource, the patience to fail twice in 100-degree heat and rebuild without complaint. The humility to learn from magazines older than her parents. Drought solutions don't require grants or engineers. They require attention and the willingness to ask, what if this still works? Sophie is 13 now. She's helping design systems for 4 neighboring properties. Mr. Baros helps her with the hydraulic calculations over morning espresso. Olivia's Instagram post went viral, 38,000 likes and counting. UC Davis is studying Sophie's system for low-income farm adaptation and the discarded pipes that once sat rusting behind Kern County barns. They're growing food again. What did Sophie's story teach you about solving problems with what you already have? Tell us in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. This community stretches further than you'd think. If stories like this matters to you, subscribe now. We'll be back next week with another one.